Today we have the most beautiful, talented, and experienced Lori Vann. Lori is a psychologist, an international speaker, media guest, and five-time author, a regarded behavioral health expert and founder of Vann Associates, coaching, counseling, and consulting. With 25 years of clinical experience, she has written 5 books with 2 more on the way. Welcome, Lori. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's a privilege to help out in whatever way I can.
Thank you. You will help a lot. So, we were talking a little bit before we started recording about your own experience with dating and relationship, with dating particularly. And I really, really like what you shared with me. Will you mind to start reshare that with our audience?
Yes. So I found myself single again in my late 30s and being at a little bit of a loss of, okay, well, how do you start to date again? And at that point, there weren't a whole lot of resources. The things that were out there were very expensive paid dating groups and heard a lot of negative things about them. I was Googling them and hearing the reviews and complaints and lawsuits and whatnot. And I thought, well, there has to be a better way. For myself, I found meetup.com, which is a free site and it is national and found some groups for singles, adult singles that did a variety of activities and interests. And so I joined up with those, and that was a great, stepping back into the social world after, well, being out of it for a while. And then I was very fortunate to make some great friends, acquaintances. Actually, met my husband, now husband, through one of those groups.
How
But what I did
wonderful.
realize is that I wasn't alone in feeling that clueless. I'm at a loss of like, how do you do this? Because dating in your 20s is very different when you're in your 30s, 40s, and 50s. And
Right.
so that's when I started to do a lot of research and thought, I'm like, well, I'm a licensed professional counselor. Like I have a master's degree in counseling. I should know some of these things. Like, why is this so much more challenging? And dating really is its own specialty. And that's when I started to offer dating seminars and ones that were really targeted for those in that demographic to help guide them so that they wouldn't, one, maybe make some of their previous mistakes that they had made in relationships, but how to really lay that foundation for healthier relationships.
How wonderful. How wonderful. I love it. I love your story about Meetup because I met my husband through Meetup as well. So I did I went on 200 first dates using eHarmony for in 2 years. And then I was taking a break because I moved to a new city and I decided to take on running. And so I joined a running group on Meetup, and that's how I met him. And so it's so interesting. We are twinsies on that, Laurie. I love it.
Yeah.
Yes, sometimes in the places that you least expected, you meet the guy. So, what were
Hmm.
those the main challenges that you found out at the beginning of your journey that you realized that were fundamental to kind of vanish in order to have an easier experience dating? Because dating doesn't have to be a chore and stressful. It can be a joyful experience.
Yes, it absolutely can. And so before I even started to date again, I knew I needed to take time off. I needed to make sure I had full closure on my first marriage, that I needed to evaluate what went wrong. I needed to own, my mistakes in it. It's really easy to demonize the other person and want to blame them for everything, but no marriage falls apart 100% because of one person. Even in situations where there's infidelity, but you still chose to marry the person in the beginning. You
Right.
still chose to maybe make some decisions that may have influence the slow breakdown of things. And yeah, it still might be a 90-10 kind of thing, but everyone has to take ownership for their part. Otherwise, they are doomed to repeat the same mistakes in the next relationship. So I took a year off because I wanted to practice what I've told clients throughout the decades. And that was, okay, if you've been married and you were married for any length of time, then you really probably should take 1 year off to make sure that you can be single on your own, that you're not codependent, that you can make it through all of those major events and major holidays being single and not having a crutch of a relationship. Because that's
Right.
really not fair to the other person. It's not fair to yourself. And that you know that you are then able to make dating relationships not based on emotions and out of that need, but now you're choosing to date because you want. And that is a really important distinction to make because when need dating is emotionally based, and emotionally based decisions rarely ever work out. So that was sort of the beginning piece of it. And then I had developed handouts over that time that I provide clients. And so I worked those. And it is a little bit, humbling, but it was also really helpful. It's like it gave me clarity of, so what are the things that are my non-negotiables in a relationship? And to have them written down and then have the other sections of my ideal person handout that I created and to have that, clearly stated in black and white that it was the person needed to meet the list. It wasn't making the list meet the person. And that was another really important distinction of before I started dating, I had clarity on what I was looking for. And I think sometimes when people jump back into dating, they
Right.
don't always have that kind of clarity. It's a lot. It's also sort of, for lack of a better way, puts the energy you put out too. When you come from a place of need, you put out more of the desperate vibe. And to sort of picture it like this, there are unhealthy people in this world that are players, that are manipulators, that just don't have your best interest in mind. And they seek out individuals that they can take advantage of. And
Right.
when you have that need mentality, that need vibe, that is truly like blood in the water. That is the chum in the water and they are the sharks and they can smile it from miles away and they're going to circle in and they're going to get you. And when you have a want mentality, that's like a shark repellent in a matter of speaking.
Love it. Love it. Shark repellent. I love it. Oh my God, Lori, I also use I was talking to a friend yesterday and she was going through something with a friend, not a lover. And I was using that also analogy, the shark analogy. That's beautiful. Awesome. So what else happened after that? You were dating, you were practicing, you were walking your talk, and then how did you meet your husband?
Was at one of the meetup groups. It's interestingly, this group was a DFW singles was the name of it. And many of us got married from that group. So it served
Oh,
its purpose. It worked well. There are a lot of couples that came from it.
wow.
But it was at one of the events they put on every Friday during the summer. They were at this sand volleyball place in town. And I had already gone to probably a handful of events already, had already started to make friends in that group. And then it was, I think, one of his very first groups he attended. And so someone that I knew who was outgoing and was Mr. Introducer, Bill introduced us and he said, "Hey, Lori, this is Monty. It's one of his first groups." And so I'm just introducing him to people. I'm like, "Oh, okay." And so we chatted for a bit and then it just, things over the months progressed from there. We had our first date, I think, probably about 2 or 3 months after that. And
Oh,
it's like,
okay. So
okay,
you
well, this
took your
is
time.
interesting.
Nice, nice, really nice.
Yeah.
I like that you didn't go immediately into a relationship, that you
No, and sometimes it was he wasn't able to attend the events, but, my mindset was at that point, I'm building my social network, I'm building my friends, that dating is sort of like an accessory in a matter of speaking, that I'm gonna go on and live my life. I'm going to develop these things, and if something comes along, that's great and fantastic, but I'm not putting my life on hold.
Right,
And definitely one of the mistakes that I've seen people make is they forget their friendships when they start to date someone. And that leads you in, or possibly leads you into a suffocating relationship, but it can also make it more difficult to break up with a person because you've already sacrificed your friendships for this dating situation. So now you're going to feel like you're all alone and having to start all over again.
right.
So that was a little bit of the thought too of like, well, I'm gonna keep on going. If something happens, awesome, but I'm gonna go keep having fun with friends and developing who I am as a person and professionally and socially and just live life.
Absolutely, love it. What you said a second ago kind of made me think in my mind about boundaries. I know you do a lot of work with boundaries as well, and I find it fascinating because I didn't have any boundaries, none. I grew up in a house where I shared my bedroom with my two sisters. We shared a bathroom with five. My parents' bedroom was next to ours, and in order to get to their bedroom, they had to get through ours. There was no privacy whatsoever. We were like all on top of each other. And I think that was one of the reasons I struggled so much with boundaries. And you were mentioning how to keep our tribe of friends close. It may change a little bit while dating because we are going to use a lot of time on dating if we are, intentionally dating. But to keep them and keep nurturing those relationships, sometimes it takes to have healthy boundaries and healthy communication skills because we may have to assert those boundaries to the people we are dating. So, how would you recommend? What are boundaries to begin with, and how would you recommend a way for a woman that is, that doesn't know doesn't want to come off as too aggressive or too independent? I don't know, any self-doubt that she may have in that area of asserting her boundaries.
Mhm. Well, so whenever I'm coaching someone or counseling someone and I assess where their boundaries are at, and the initial guideline I give is to think of it as this continuum. And on the one end, you have people who are very closed off in their boundaries, meaning that, they've got the moat in front of them. No one's going to get to them. They're like, everyone stay away. And almost invariably, it's because they got burnt. Someone really hurt them. And so our survival brain says, how do I prevent hurt from happening again? Oh, I protect myself from backing off and I never get close to someone again. And the sad thing is that you're still going to end up getting hurt. It might be a little bit different way of getting hurt, but being the totally closed off doesn't work.
Yeah.
To think of a visual, it's having a moat around you with the alligators and on all the rest of it. It's a very lonely existence. But on the other end of the continuum are people pleasers. That doesn't work out well at all. I would say the vast majority of people that come into counseling and definitely the vast majority that really struggle with unhealthy coping skills, it's related to people pleasing. And with that, they also have been hurt in their life, that they've gotten burnt, but their survival brain says, I'm just going to go along to get along. I'm
Right,
just going to say yes. I'm just going to put on my happy face
right,
and just keep everything else bottled up. And I'll just figure out how to deal with it because I have a fear of being rejected. I have a fear of being alone, being abandoned, of people not liking me. And
right.
so that's what drives their decisions. And that just never works out. That is a whole hot mess of problems that lead to depression and anxiety and a whole host of other behaviors. So that's sort of a starting point with people is for them to identify where on that continuum are they.
Right,
You don't want to be so closed off. You've got the whole cement wall, but you don't want to be this whole open, like anybody can come in
right.
either.
Open for business. Yeah, that's
So
awesome. And how do we bring it up when if we are in this situation that we are talking today about dating, if we are dating somebody.
one of the things that I use, one of the handouts that I've come across is what's called a safe versus unsafe people handout. I
Okay.
believe it was Dr. Burns that created it, and I've added additional things to it. But the essence of it, and there are a couple other handouts that I use with clients too, that really gives them clarity, but it's also in black and white, so it holds you accountable too. And these are the warning signs. So on the safe versus unsafe, I'll have individuals go through and just one, get familiar with it. Two, to start writing out the initials next to each of those categories. And if you see someone's initials consistently coming up on the unsafe side, there's your red flag. Like it's time to put some brakes on
Maybe
that relationship, start, building up some of that wall.
mm,
And likewise, if you have people that come up a lot on the safe side, you keep them in your inner circle of influence. You listen to their feedback. The thing is, unhealthy people are threatened by healthy people. Unhealthy people are going to try to pull you away from your resources because that's what's in their best interest. And eventually, the dynamic you see is this where this person has all the control because they've isolated this person. And so it's not an equal relationship anymore. And to think of it in a puppet master sense, they get to pull the strings and you just have to go along
yeah,
with it. And that's how people can get stuck in abusive relationships. And it's not an overnight process, it's a very gradual thing that happens. But that's where, if you're really clear from the get go of who your ideal person is, and you really understand what safe and unsafe look like, and a couple of the other things that I go over with understanding your Bill of Rights, you're going to attract a totally different kind of person into your life.
right. Why do you think so many women are kind of like resistant to do the work? They just don't want to do it. They want to the ideal relationship just to slap on their just fall on their lap
Yeah.
and everything be unicorns and rainbows.
I think there's a couple of pieces or a couple of factors. One, unfortunately, I think there are women that have been conditioned to believe that they don't deserve any better, that
Mm,
they've bought into that emotional and verbal abuse, that this is as good as it gets,
right,
that I just deserve to be treated this way. This is how it's always going to be. And they can't conceptualize anything different. So they have what my business coach calls this permafrost, where they're not allowing themselves to get to that deeper issue, to unearth a lot of that stuff. And that sort of segues to the other reason people don't like to do the work is because it's uncomfortable.
right,
You're gonna have to look in the mirror and you're gonna have to own that, you know what? You've made some mistakes. You
right,
know what? There are some things that probably should be doing differently. That there are some choices you're making that aren't healthy. And there may be a period of time that you have to be alone for a period as you transition out of the unhealthy people in your life and you start to try to attract the healthier individuals in.
right.
Because this is a phrase I frequently use, I'm sure my clients get tired of it,
Uh-huh.
is that healthy attracts healthy. Hands down, that's how it works. Conversely, unhealthy will always attract unhealthy. It is a magnet. And this is something a counselor told me 20 something years ago is he said you could put 100 people into the same room and give them an hour, and within that time people with similar dents are going to pair up with one another.
Right.
And it's just from what I've seen throughout my counseling career, yeah, It's the unhealthy connections start to find the other unhealthy connections or pairings. And people that are really on that healthier, safer side, they they're more selective. They know what to look for.
Right.
It's not them being snobby. They just go, I don't want drama.
Right.
That looks like drama. No, thank you.
Right. So true. So true. Yes, I love it. I cannot agree more.
I think it's the socialization process too. Females are just socialized differently than males are in communication. And this is a general statement. Of course, there's always exceptions to every statement. Men's communication tends to be like that. It's very linear. What they say is generally what they mean. Females, just because of how the brain is truly wired, there is an absolute difference between a female brain and a male brain. We, a lot of women are like, no, no, really, truly, science says the wiring and the parts of the brain the woman uses in thinking and making decisions is different than the parts of the brain that the male uses. There are absolutely, there's a difference in the process. But for females and how they're socialized, we tend to communicate in layers. I'm not saying either is good or bad. It's just understand there's a difference. And so
Right.
for females, we look for nuance. We look for the tone. We look at the body language. We look at so many more levels.
Right.
And sometimes to our detriment, we read into things that aren't actually there. And we're over analyzing stuff that's not supposed to be there. But I think that does get in the way of healthier communication between the sexes is that each has their own expectation. And if you're not communicating that, then sometimes feelings get hurt and males get frustrated because you're like, that's not what I meant. And the female's like, well, but, and sometimes I think females are more likely to make assumptions
Mm.
and they're not asking for clarification. And the thing is, healthy people, if you ask them, they're going to be honest and they're going to tell you. And the other thing is, healthy people will actually ask. Unhealthy people will keep it to themselves and they'll make all these assumptions and create all these stories in their brains. And it does no good whatsoever, it just creates a miserable life.
Right. Right. That is so, so true. So important to know. Thank you so much, Lori. I know you have a present for our viewers. Would you mind to share what the present is about?
Yes, for any of the viewers, you can have a complimentary 30-minute consult with me. Also, I'll send you the boundaries assessment that is one of the several handouts that I use with my coaching clients. And starts to give you some clarity of, oh, hey, there might be some boundary issues going on, and they're presenting themselves in ways you may not have expected them to. And I'll also do a 45-minute video on just dating 101 tips.
Oh my
So for
God.
those that
Thank
are
you.
interested, that's the package.
Thank you so much. I love it. I love it because you mentioned that list of safe and unsafe and how can and if they do the call with you, they can go over that maybe because
Mhm.
that's super valuable. So I love it. I love it. And all the other goodies. I'm gonna place the link under this video. Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure. You are adorable, and I am so, so grateful for the kind of work you do at all the different levels. Such a talented woman, and I am very happy you are happily married.
Yes. Yes, indeed.